The Viridian Collective called it a mercy killing. Captain Lyra Ashworth watched through the viewport as her homeworld burned. The blue marble of Earth now a cancerous orange sphere, wrapped in nuclear fire. 6 billion souls gone in 3 hours of systematic orbital bombardment. The evacuation ships had saved maybe 10,000. Maybe. Status report, she commanded, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Lieutenant Commander Knox Kelleran looked up from his console, his scarred face grim. 743 ships confirmed lost. The Sovereign's Pride, New Olympus, Iron Will all gone. We've got maybe 200 vessels left across the entire human fleet. Ashworth nodded, absorbing the numbers like physical blows. 200 ships against the Collective's 10,000. The mathematics were brutal, but mathematics had never accounted for human stubbornness. Ma'am, Communications Officer Kira Valdane called out. We're receiving a transmission from the Collective flagship. On screen, the holographic display shimmered, revealing the tall, crystalline form of Archon Veltharax, Supreme Commander of the Collective's pacification fleet. Its voice resonated like wind chimes in a hurricane. Captain Ashworth, it began, its tone carrying what might have been sympathy in a creature capable of such emotion. Your species fought valiantly, but the decision has been made. Humanity represents a wound in the galactic order, violent, unpredictable, spreading like an infection across peaceful systems. We have cauterized that wound. Ashworth stepped forward, her jaw tight. You murdered 6 billion innocent people. We prevented 6 billion future wars. Veltharax replied, your species' capacity for violence is unprecedented in 3 centuries. You have initiated more conflicts than the Collective has seen in 3 millennia. The galaxy will know peace now, and the survivors, you will be relocated to designated worlds, monitored, contained. Your warships will be decommissioned. Your technology will be studied and archived. Humanity's chapter in galactic history ends today, but ends with dignity if you surrender now. Ashworth looked around her bridge. Knox's hands were already moving toward his weapons console. Kira had tears streaming down her face, but her fingers danced across communication rays, coordinating with the surviving fleet. In the corner, Master Chief Garrett Thorne, old enough to remember when humans first reached for the stars, simply cracked his knuckles with predatory satisfaction. These were her people, Earth's children, forged in the crucible of 10,000 years of warfare, raised on stories of impossible victories and last stands. The Collective thought they understood humanity's capacity for violence, but they had only seen humans at war with each other. They had never seen humans united by genocide. Archon, Ashworth said, her voice carrying across the void, you called Earth a wound. You're right, but you made one critical error in your xenobiology studies. Veltharax tilted its head, crystals refracting light in curious patterns. Wounds, scar, Ashworth continued, and scar tissue is stronger than the original flesh. She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of failing life support, and the distant thunder of Collective dreadnoughts, positioning for the final extermination. All ships, she broadcast on the fleet channel. This is Captain Ashworth. I won't lie to you, we're outnumbered, outgunned, and the Collective thinks they've already won. They're probably right. She paused, looking out at the burning corpse of their homeworld. But they forgot something important about humans. We don't know how to quit. We don't know how to surrender. And we sure as hell don't know how to forgive. Static crackled across dozens of ship channels as captains responded with grim acknowledgments. The Defiance edged under Captain Rex Haverth. The Blood of Martyrs commanded by Captain Zoe Blackthorne. The Unbroken Chain with its skeleton crew of engineers and miners turned warriors. All stations. Battle stations, Ashworth ordered. Weapons hot. Shields to maximum. If we're going to die today, we're taking as many of these bastards with us as possible. The tactical display showed the overwhelming disparity: 200 human ships against 10,000 Collective vessels. But as Ashworth watched her fleet form into attack formations, she smiled grimly. The Collective had studied human warfare, but they had studied it wrong. They saw chaos where there was method, brutality where there was necessity. They were about to learn the difference between fighting humans and fighting for humanity. The first engagement began at 1347 hours, Terrence Standard Time, exactly 4 hours after Earth's death. Captain Ashworth's tactical display lit up like a nightmare Christmas tree as Collective scout formations moved to intercept the human fleet. The enemy vessels were elegant things, flowing crystalline shapes that looked more grown than built. their weapons arrays humming with harmonic frequencies that could shatter molecular bonds. Contact bearing to 7 Mark 8, Knox reported. Collective destroyer group, 12 ships strong, they're moving to box us in. Belay that, came Captain Haverth's voice over the comm. This is Defiance Edge. We've got them. Ashworth watched as Haverth's heavy cruiser broke formation, its scarred hull bristling with missile pods and rail cannons. The Defiance Edge had seen action in the Proxima Wars, the Belt conflicts, and a dozen smaller brushfire wars across human space. It looked like a weapon designed by someone who understood that war was about killing, not art. The collective destroyers moved in perfect synchronization, their formation a geometrically precise lattice of overlapping fire zones. They opened up with harmonic disruptors, weapons that didn't simply destroy matter, but convinced it to stop existing in an orderly fashion. Haverth didn't bother with formation or tactics. He did something the collective had never seen humans do. He rammed straight through their center line. The Defiance Edge took the brunt of 12 harmonic beams at once. Its shields collapsed in seconds, armor plating sublimating into exotic particles. But Haverth had killed his inertial compensators at the last second, letting physics do what human engineering couldn't. The heavy cruiser smashed into the collective formation. At 17,000 kilometers per hour, its dying bulk taking 3 destroyers within in a fusion fireball that lit up the tactical display like a newborn star. The remaining collective ships scattered, their perfect formation broken by something their tactical algorithms had labeled tactically impossible. Jesus, Kira whispered. Rex is gone. Rex is buying us time, Ashworth corrected, her voice hard. All ships, form up on my position. Combat formation Delta 7, the human fleet reformed around the indomitable will. Ashworth's command dreadnought. Unlike the elegant collective vessels, human ships looked like what they were, tools of war built by a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of killing. Angular, brutal, covered in armor and bristling with weapons that served only one purpose. The main collective battle group appeared on the display, 800 ships in a formation that resembled a three-dimensional flower, each petal a squadron of vessels that could cross-link their fire to create zones of absolute destruction. Ma'am, Knox said quietly, they're targeting our civilian evacuation ships. Ashworth's blood went cold. 3 dozen refugee transports, packed with the last survivors of Earth, running silent in the shadow of a dead moon. Non-combatants, children, the last human families in existence. All ships, she broadcast, the collective is targeting our civilians. Full burn, attack formation, weapons free. What followed was less a battle than a controlled explosion. Captain Blackthorn's blood of martyrs led the charge. It's forward. Batteries opening up with mass drivers that hurled tungsten slugs at relativistic speeds. The slugs punched through collective shields like paper, sending crystalline ships spinning apart in clouds of exotic matter. But for every collective ship that died, they killed 3 humans in return. The Terran's wrath lasted 18 seconds, under concentrated fire, before its reactor went critical. The New Horizon managed to ram a collective battlecruiser, both ships vaporizing in a flash that briefly outshone the local star. Ashworth gritted her teeth as casualty reports flooded in. Steel resolve gone, freedom's price gone, eternal vigilance crippled and drifting. Mum, Thorne called from his position at the damage control station. We're losing them to fast. At this rate, we'll be combat ineffective in 20 minutes. Through the chaos, Ashworth watched the collective formation adjusting, adapting, learning from each exchange. They were fighting like they always fought, precisely, efficiently, with the cold calculation of a species that had conquered the galaxy through superior technology and coordination. They were fighting humans like they fought everyone else. That was their mistake. All ships, Ashworth broadcast, execute Broken Arrow protocol. The comm channels fell silent. Broken Arrow was a doctrine that existed only in human military theory, a tactical philosophy so ruthless that most species refused to acknowledge it existed. Ma'am, Knox said carefully, are you sure? Ashworth looked at the tactical display, at the collective formations closing in on the civilian transports, at the burning wrecks of human ships drifting among the stars. Execute, she said. Across the fleet, human captains began giving orders that no civilized species would ever consider. Reactor safeties were overridden. Life support was redirected to weapons. Ships already dying from battle damage were pushed beyond their structural limits, their crews volunteering to become guided. Missiles. The collective watched in growing alarm as human vessels began behaving in ways their computers couldn't predict or counter. Ships that should have retreated instead accelerated into certain death. Vessels with critical damage somehow continued fighting until their hulls came apart around their crews, and slowly, impossibly, the human formation began to advance. The battle had been raging for 6 hours when Captain Ashworth realized they were winning, and that victory might be worse than defeat. Her tactical display showed the impossible. Human forces had carved a bloody corridor through 3 collective battle groups, leaving a trail of crystalline debris that caught the light of distant stars. Like scattered diamonds, the cost had been horrific. They were down to 97 ships from the original to 100, but they had bought the civilian transports enough time to reach the edge of the system. Status on the evacuation fleet, she asked. 36 ships confirmed clear of the gravity well, Kira reported. They're preparing for jump to the Kepler refuge. Ashworth nodded, allowing herself a moment of grim satisfaction. At least some of humanity would survive this day. But as she watched the tactical display, her satisfaction curdled into dread. The collective wasn't retreating. If anything, more ships were arriving. Mum, Knox said, his voice tight with disbelief. I'm reading. Massive hyperspace signatures. Grid coordinates 77 Alpha through 9-9 Delta. Double quotes. The display updated, and Ashworth's heart sank. Wave after wave of collective vessels were dropping out of hyperspace, not hundreds this time, but thousands. The elegant crystal ships formed up in perfect geometric patterns that stretched across light minutes of space. Communications from the flagship, Kira announced. Ashworth straightened. On screen, Arch and Veltherax appeared again, but this time its crystalline form seemed somehow darker, the harmonic patterns in its voice carrying undertones of what might have been respect or fear. Captain Ashworth, it began, you have exceeded all projections. Your species' tactical adaptability is remarkable. In 6 hours, you have inflicted casualties equivalent to what the collective typically sustains in 6 months of pacification operations. Is this the part where you surrender? Ashworth asked. Something that might have been laughter resonated from the alien. No, Captain. This is the part where we acknowledge that our initial assessment was incorrect. Humanity is not merely a violent species. You are an existential threat to galactic stability. The decision has been made to deploy the Purifier fleet. The display zoomed out, showing the true scope of what was coming. 15,000 collective ships, including the massive cathedral ships that served as mobile weapons platforms, each one capable of sterilizing entire star systems. You will be given one final opportunity to surrender, Veltherax continued. Order your remaining forces to stand down, and the evacuation transports will be allowed to reach their destination. Refuse, and we will hunt down every human in the galaxy until your species exists only in historical records. Ashworth looked around her bridge. Her crew was exhausted, faces streaked with sweat and blood from 6 hours of continuous combat. Half her consoles were dark, emergency lighting casting everything in hellish red shadows. The ship itself groaned, with structural damage, held together by emergency force fields and the stubborn refusal of her engineering crew to let it die. Captain, Master Chief Thorne said quietly, the civvies are clear. Mission accomplished. It was true. The primary objective, saving the last remnants of humanity, had been achieved. The logical thing, the sensible thing, would be to surrender. Let the collective study them, contain them, but at least let the species survive in some form. But as Ashworth looked out at the burning wreckage of the collective fleet, at the impossible odds they had already overcome, she remembered something her grandfather had told her about the old wars on Earth. Sometimes, he had said, the only way to win is to make the other side realize that beating you costs more than letting you live. Archon, she said, cutting back into the transmission. I have a counter proposal. Veltherax tilted its head, crystals catching the light. You want to know why humans are so violent? Ashworth continued. It's not because we enjoy it. It's because we're very, very good at it. And we've had 10,000 years to practice on each other. She gestured to the tactical display. You've studied our conflicts, but you studied them wrong. You saw chaos, but we were learning. Every war, every battle, every skirmish was us figuring out new ways to kill things that didn't want to die. We weren't just fighting each other, we were preparing. Preparing for what? Ashworth smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. For you. She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. All ships, this is Ashworth. The The collective wants to make this a war of extermination. That's fine by me. But there's something they need to understand about humans when we decide to destroy something. We're very thorough about it. The bridge fell silent as her words sank in. Ma'am, Knox said. Carefully, are you talking about the Prometheus Protocol? The Prometheus Protocol. The theoretical weapon system that human scientists had developed during the darkest days of the solar wars, then locked away when they realized what they had created. A way to turn any star into a weapon, not just destroying planets, but entire solar systems. Every human ship carried the activation codes, buried deep in their computers behind safeguards that required unanimous consent from the senior staff. It had never been used, never been tested on anything larger than stellar fragments. But the theory was sound. The collective has decided to hunt down every human in the galaxy. Ashworth said, that gives us a strategic advantage they don't understand. Ma'am, they have to protect their civilization, their worlds, their populations, their infrastructure. She looked out at the approaching Purifier fleet. We don't have a civilization left to protect. That makes us the most dangerous thing in the galaxy, a military force with nothing left to lose. She opened a channel to the fleet. All remaining ships, this is Captain Ashworth. We're implementing the Scorched Galaxy Doctrine. Every ship capable of hyperspace jump will disperse to collective home systems. If they want to hunt us down, they'll have to choose between chasing us and protecting their own worlds. The tactical display began updating as human ships peeled away from the main formation, headed for hyperspace jump points. Each one carried enough firepower to cripple a planet and the knowledge to turn stars into weapons. The collective had wanted to end humanity's chapter in galactic history. They were about to learn that some chapters end with fire. The first collective homeworld died at 03 for 7 hours, 17 days after Earth's fall. Captain Zoe Blackthorn's blood of martyrs had limped into the Velketh system. With failing life support and a crew of 37, all that remained of her original complement of 800, the system was home to 12 billion collective citizens, a species of crystalline beings who had never known war, never conceived that someone might target their nursery worlds. They learned quickly. Blackthorn positioned her dying ship at the edge of the system's asteroid belt and began the most methodical campaign of terror the galaxy had ever witnessed. She didn't target military installations or orbital defenses. She targeted infrastructure, power grids, communications networks, the delicate quantum resonance fields that the collective used to coordinate their hive-like society. For 6 days, she played a deadly game of cat and mouse with the system's defense forces, using her ship's superior mobility to strike and fade like a ghost. When they finally cornered her above Velketh Prime, she activated the Prometheus Protocol. The star went nova 3 hours later. 12 billion lives gone in a flash of gamma radiation and superheated plasma, but the shock waves that rippled through collective space carried more than just energy. They carried a message that human survivors intercepted across dozens of light years. This is Captain Blackthorn, came the transmission. Broadcasts on all collective frequencies seconds before the star exploded. They called us awound. They forgot that some wounds fester. Captain Ashworth received the message aboard the Indomitable. Well, as she coordinated the deadliest asymmetric warfare campaign in galactic history, her remaining fleet had scattered across collective space, each ship operating independently, targeting worlds that had never seen violence. The results were devastating. Captain Marcus Vane's Defiance Last had taken out the Zephyrian shipyards, using controlled singularities to collapse the massive orbital platforms into their parent star. 8 trillion credits worth of infrastructure, decades of construction gone in minutes. The Steel Phoenix under Captain Lisa Torren had struck at collective research stations, specifically targeting their xenobiology centers. If the collective wanted to study humanity, they would do it without their primary research facilities. But it was the silent vengeance that delivered the cruelest blow. Captain David Korath had found something the collective valued more than military assets or economic infrastructure: their memory vaults, the crystalline archives that contained 40,000 years of collective history, art, and culture. He destroyed 12 of them before the collective caught him. The psychological impact was immediate and catastrophic. For the first time in their recorded history, the collective faced an enemy that didn't just want to defeat them, it wanted to erase them. Species across the galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity demonstrated what total war actually meant. Ashworth monitored the chaos from the bridge of her flagship, now hidden in the shadow of a rogue planet in an uninhabited system. Her Crew was down to skeleton strength. The ship itself held together by emergency repairs and stubborn determination. Casualty reports? She asked. Lieutenant Commander Kelleran looked up from his station, his face haggard from weeks of constant stress. 43 ships confirmed lost. We estimate we've eliminated approximately 800 collective vessels and destroyed infrastructure on 17 worlds. The mathematics were still brutal, but they were shifting in humanity's favor. Each human ship was accounting for nearly 20 collective vessels, and the economic damage was incalculable. More importantly, they were forcing the collective to disperse their forces, hunting human raiders across hundreds of star systems. Communications from the collective high command, Kirai announced. Ashworth straightened. It had been 12 days since their last contact with Veltherax on screen, but the figure that appeared wasn't the familiar crystal form of the Archon. This was something else, a being of pure energy contained within a geometric framework. That hurt to look at directly. I am prime consciousness Zixithal, it announced, its voice carrying harmonics that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly in the brain. I speak for the collective council. Where's Veltherax? Ashworth asked. Archon Veltherax has been reassigned. Its tactical assessments regarding your species have proven catastrophically inadequate. The entity paused, energy patterns shifting within its frame. You have forced us to confront a truth we have spent millennia avoiding, that some species cannot be civilized, only contained or eliminated. Ashworth felt a cold smile cross her face. Finally figured that out, did you? The collective offers terms, Zixithal continued. Cease your terrorist campaign, and we will establish reservation worlds for human survivors. Refuse, and we will implement protocol Omega, the sterilization of every world that has ever hosted human life. Terrorists? Ashworth laughed, the sound harsh in the bridge's recycled air. You glassed our homeworld and murdered 6 billion civilians. What did you think we were going to do? Send you a strongly worded diplomatic protest? The energy being's patterns flickered with what might have been agitation. Your response has been disproportionate. You have murdered trillions of innocent beings. No, Ashworth said, her voice going deadly quiet. We've demonstrated what humanity looks like when you take away everything we have to lose. You wanted to study us? Congratulations, you're getting a masterclass in human warfare. She leaned forward, staring directly at the entity. But here's what you still don't understand. Every ship you're chasing, every world you're trying to protect, every resource you're diverting to hunt us down, that's victory for us. You're not fighting a fleet anymore. You're fighting an idea. What idea? Ashworth's smile turned predatory. That if you hurt humanity, we will make you regret it for the rest of your civilization's existence. We'll turn your own empire into a weapon against you. We'll make you afraid to sleep, afraid to expand, afraid to do anything but watch the skies and wonder when the next human ship will appear. Zixithal's energy patterns flared. You cannot win this war. Your species numbers in the thousands now, ours in the trillions. You're right, Ashworth agreed. We can't win, but we can make damn sure you lose too. She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. They looked back at her with expressions of grim determination, faces marked by weeks of impossible battles and Pyrrhic victories. All stations, she ordered, prepare for Operation Broken Chain. We're going hunting. The Battle of Zarian's Gate began when 16 human ships dropped out of hyperspace, directly into the center of the largest collective fleet assembly in Galactic history. Captain Ashworth had chosen the target carefully. The Zarian system was home to the collective's primary military academy, where future commanders learned the art of civilized warfare. 3,000 student vessels, ranging from frigates to battle cruisers, were conducting graduation exercises under the supervision of the collective's most experienced admirals. It was also the perfect place to demonstrate that humanity had moved beyond the concept of civilized warfare entirely. All ships, Ashworth broadcast as klaxons wailed across her bridge, execute Broken Chain. No prisoners, no quarter, no mercy. The human formation was a thing of savage beauty. 16 ships arranged in a pattern that looked random, but wasn't. Each vessel positioned to create overlapping fields of fire that would turn space itself into a killing ground. At the center flew the indomitable Will, Ashworth's battered flagship, its hull scarred by dozens of battles, but its weapons array still hungry for collective blood. The collective response was immediate, but confused. 3,000 ships against 16 should have been a massacre. But the Academy commanders had never faced an enemy that viewed tactical doctrine as a suggestion rather than a law. Captain Torres and the Wrathful Vengeance opened the engagement by ramming the collective training squadron at 60% light speed. Her ship disintegrated on impact, but the kinetic energy release vaporized 7 vessels and sent debris sifting through dozens more. The surviving cadets scattered in panic, their perfect formations dissolving into chaos. First blood to Torres. Master Chief Thorne reported with grim satisfaction. Collective formation integrity down 30%, but the collective adapted quickly. Admiral Kelthus, the system's commanding officer, began coordinating a response that showcased for decades of military experience. The student vessels formed into defensive clusters, while the Academy's instructor ships, veteran warships with experienced crews, moved to engage the human raiders directly. The Solar Wrath under Captain Morrison found itself surrounded by 8 collective destroyers, their harmonic weapons creating a cage of destructive energy. Morrison's response was to vent his ship's atmosphere through the weapons ports. While firing everything, he had a tactic that increased his firing rate by 30% at the cost of killing anyone not in a sealed suit. The gambit worked, for collective destroyers died in the first salvo, their crystalline hulls shattered by tungsten slugs traveling at relativistic speeds. But the remaining ships focused their fire, and the Solar Wrath came apart in a cascade of fusion explosions that lit up the tactical display. Morrison's gone, Knox reported, but he took 6 of them with him. The battle became a series of individual duels as the human formation scattered, each ship drawing off portions of the collective fleet in a deadly game of divide and conquer. Captain Vale's persistent shadow led a dozen Academy cruisers on a chase through the system's asteroid belt, using the rock formations to break up their formation. Before turning to engage them individually, the Undying Fury found itself facing off against the Academy's pride, a massive dreadnought called Harmony's Shield that outmassed the human ship by a factor of 10. Captain Reeves's response was to target the dreadnought's bridge with everything he had, while broadcasting humanity's favorite war songs on all frequencies. The psychological warfare worked. The young collective officers aboard Harmony's Shield had never heard human music before. The discordant, aggressive rhythms that spoke of a species that had turned conflict into art. Their formation wavered, their firing solutions became erratic, and Reeves exploited every moment of hesitation. But the numbers were telling. For every collective ship that died, humanity lost irreplaceable vessels and crews. The burning Defiance lasted 12 minutes before reactor failure sent it spiraling into Zirion's primary star. The last stand managed to take out an entire Academy squadron before concentrated fire from 50 ships finally broke through its shields. Ashworth watched the casualty count climb on her tactical display while coordinating the battle. From the Indomitable Will, they were down to 8 ships now, but they had destroyed nearly 400 collective vessels and thrown the entire Academy into chaos. "Ma'am," Kira called out, "I'm reading massive hyperspace signatures, multiple vectors." The display updated, showing the arrival of fresh collective forces. The home fleet rushed from the capital system to deal with the human incursion. 200 pristine warships under the command of Admiral Zethkar, the collective's most decorated military officer. All remaining ships, Ashworth broadcast. "This is it. Remember, we're not here to win. We're here to teach them what it costs to fight humanity." The final phase of the battle was pure chaos. Human ships, outnumbered more than 20 to 1, used every dirty trick in their tactical playbook. They launched kinetic projectiles laced with antimatter. They overloaded their reactors to create impromptu nuclear mines. They rammed damaged Academy ships into the path of incoming home fleet vessels. Captain Beck's terrible swift sword managed to grapple with a collective battlecruiser. Both ships locked in a spinning death spiral as their crews fought hand-to-hand in the twisted wreckage between their hulls. The engagement lasted 3 hours before both vessels exploded simultaneously. The Iron Will under Captain Harding found itself facing Admiral Zethkar's flagship directly. The 2 ships exchanged broadsides at point-blank range, their weapons tearing through each other's hulls in a display of mutual destruction. That sent debris raining across half the system. When the tactical display finally cleared, only 3 human ships remained operational: the Indomitable Will, the badly damaged Phantom's Edge, and the Relentless Pursuit with a crew of 17 and failing life support. But the collective had paid a price that would echo through their empire for generations. Over 800 ships destroyed, including most of their next generation of officers. The Academy itself was a burning ruin, its facilities destroyed by human kinetic bombardment. Admiral Kelthus himself was dead, killed when Captain Morrison's Solar Wrath had rammed his command ship in the battle's opening minutes. The entire collective military hierarchy was in chaos, their carefully planned succession thrown into disarray. Damage report, Ashworth ordered. Hull integrity at 12%. Thorne reported, we've lost main propulsion, secondary power, and most of our weapons arrays. Life support is running on backup. Ashworth nodded, looking at the tactical display where collective ships were, regrouping for what would certainly be the final assault. 3 human ships against over 1,000 survivors of the Academy fleet and home fleet combined. But as she watched, something unexpected happened. The collective formation hesitated, ships holding position instead of advancing for the kill. Communications incoming, Kira announced. It's from the collective flagship. On screen, Admiral Zethkar appeared door, what was left of him. The collective officer's crystalline form was cracked and darkened, one arm missing entirely, his harmonic voice reduced to whispers. Captain Ashworth, he said, I invoke the code of cessation. Your forces have fought with unprecedented savagery. We request terms for your withdrawal. Ashworth stared at the alien admiral, hardly believing what she was hearing. The collective masters of the galaxy, conquerors of 1,000 worlds, were asking for terms from 3 dying ships. But as she looked at the tactical display, she understood. They weren't afraid of losing the battle, they were afraid of what humanity would do next. The request for terms was a trap, and Captain Ashworth knew it. Admiral Zethkar, she replied, her voice carrying across the void between the battered human survivors and the massive collective fleet. You must think we're idiots. The damaged collective officer's harmonic pattern shifted in what might have been confusion. Captain, I do not understand. We offer you the chance to depart with your remaining vessels intact. Ashworth laughed, the sound harsh in the indomitable will's recycled air. You offer us the chance to run so you can track us back to wherever the civilian transports went. Standard hunter-killer doctrine, let the wounded prey lead you to the rest of the herd. Around her, the bridge crew worked frantically at their stations. Master Chief Thorne had jury-rigged the weapons systems to draw power directly from life support. Lieutenant Commander Kelleran was rerouting everything non-essential through the targeting computers. They all knew this was the end, but they were determined to make it count. Ma'am, Kira whispered, I'm picking up something strange. Hyperspace distortions on the edge of the system, but they don't match collective signatures. Ashworth frowned, checking her display. The signatures were wrong, to chaotic, too irregular for collective vessels, but they were definitely ships, and they were definitely coming fast. All stations, she broadcast to her remaining vessels. Unknown contacts incoming. Assume hostile until proven otherwise. The first ships dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge, and Ashworth's heart stopped. They were human, not the sleek warships of Earth's Navy, but something else entirely. Vessels that looked like they'd been built in scrapyards and held together with determination. Converted freighters bristling with jury-rigged weapons. Mining ships with military-grade shields welded to their hulls. Even what looked like a passenger liner with missile pods strapped to its passenger decks. This is Admiral Helena Voss of the Free Human Fleet. Came a transmission that made Ashworth's blood sing with hope she'd thought was dead. We got your message, Captain Ashworth. All of them. The tactical display updated as more ships continued to arrive, dozens, then hundreds. These weren't the survivors of the evacuation transports, Ashworth realized. These were humans from the outer colonies, the frontier worlds, the places far from Earth that had been caught in the initial bombardment. Admiral Ashworth managed. How did you? Captain Blackthorn's final transmission reached us 3 weeks ago. Voss interrupted, her voice carrying across the growing fleet of improvised warships. The one about wounds that fester. Funny thing about the human colonies, Captain, we never did like being told what to do. More ships kept arriving. A Martian cargo hauler with kinetic cannons mounted on its spine. A Belter ice miner flying the old series Republic flag. Even what looked like a pleasure yacht with military-grade sensors and a crew of armed civilians. The collective fleet began repositioning, their perfect formations adapting to face this new threat. But there was something different in their movement patterns, a hesitation that hadn't been there before. Admiral Zethkar, Ashworth called out, I think your request for terms just got more complicated. The collective admiral's harmonic voice carried undertones of what might have been fear. These vessels are not military craft. They are civilian ships with civilian crews. They pose no tactical threat. You're right, Admiral Voss replied. Her voice broadcast on all frequencies. We're not military. We're farmers and miners and traders and engineers. We're parents and teachers and doctors and mechanics." Her voice hardened. "But we're also human, and you murdered our homeworld." The Free Human Fleet finished its deployment, nearly 800 ships arranged in a formation that looked like organized chaos but functioned with deadly efficiency. Each vessel was unique, modified according to its crew's skills and resources. But they all shared one thing: weapons pointed at the collective fleet. "Admiral," Captain Ashworth called out, "my ships are combat ineffective. We can't contribute much to—" "Captain," Voss interrupted, "you and your people have been fighting this war for 3 weeks with barely 200 ships. You've terrorized an entire galactic empire and made them afraid of the dark. Don't you dare tell me you can't contribute." On the tactical display, the math had shifted dramatically. The collective still outnumbered the combined human forces, but not by the impossible margins they'd grown accustomed to. More importantly, many of their ships were damaged from the Academy battle, their crews exhausted and demoralized. "Admiral," Zethkar's voice crackled across the calm, "Human fleet, you are in violation of collective space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." "Consequences?" came a new voice. Captain Maria Santos of the converted freighter Stubborn Mule. "You want to talk about consequences? My daughter was visiting Earth when you animals glassed it. She was 8 years old. My brother was on Luna Station," added Captain Jerome Okafor from the mining ship Asteroid's Revenge. "Killed in the first wave of your pacification." Voice after voice joined in, each one representing a personal loss, a family destroyed, a life cut short by the collective's systematic extermination. The Free Human Fleet wasn't just a military force, it was 800 ships worth of grief and rage given form. "Admiral Zethkar," Ashworth said, her voice cutting through the growing chorus of human voices, "you wanted to study human warfare. Here's your final lesson. We don't just fight for territory or resources or political ideals. We fight for each other." The battle began without warning or formal declaration. Captain Santos simply opened fire with her freighters' improvised missile arrays, sending a spread of nuclear warheads into the heart of the collective formation. The other ships followed suit, turning space into a storm of kinetic projectiles, energy beams, and exotic matter weapons. But this wasn't a disciplined exchange of fire between military vessels. This was a brawl, fought by people who had learned to kill using mining equipment and cargo haulers. The Belcher ships used their industrial grapples to snare collective vessels and drag them into asteroid fields. The agricultural ships from the outer colonies deployed clouds of nanoscale machines designed to break down organic matter, repurposed crop dusters that dissolved collective hulls. At the molecular level, the Indomitable will join the fray, its dying weapon systems adding their voice to the human chorus of destruction. Ashworth watched as her tactical display became a three-dimensional representation of controlled chaos. 800 human ships fighting with improvised weapons and jury-rigged systems against the most advanced military force in the galaxy. And somehow, impossibly, they were winning. The collective formations, designed for fighting disciplined military opponents, couldn't adapt to the sheer unpredictability of human civilian ingenuity. Ships that should have been easy targets proved to have hidden weapons or impossible maneuvers. Vessels that looked like they were fleeing suddenly turned to ram enemy formations. At the last second, Captain Hassan's Desert Wind, a converted passenger liner, had somehow managed to board a collective cruiser using modified maintenance pods. The alien crew found themselves fighting hand-to-hand combat in their own corridors against humans armed with mining tools and industrial equipment. The Titan's Hammer, a heavy construction ship, used its industrial manipulator arms to physically tear apart collective vessels, treating enemy ships like derelict stations to be salvaged for scrap. But the collective weren't giving up without a fight. Admiral Zethkar rallied his remaining forces, pulling them into a defensive formation that maximized their overlapping fire zones. Collective ships began to fall back on their superior technology and training, turning the battle into a grinding slugfest that favored their advantages. The human casualties began to mount. The Prairie Song, an agricultural transport carrying a crew of volunteer farmers, took a direct hit from a collective dreadnought and vaporized instantly. The New Series, an asteroid mining platform, managed to ram an enemy battlecruiser, but was destroyed in the process. "Admiral," Knox reported, "we're losing ships faster than we're killing them. At this rate, we make everyone count." Voss replied grimly, "All ships, implement Phoenix Protocol. If your ship is dying, make sure it takes them with you." Ashworth watched as the free human fleet began to transform itself into a weapon of mutual destruction. Ships with critical damage didn't retreat, they accelerated toward enemy formations, turning themselves into kinetic missiles. Vessels with failing reactors overloaded their power systems, creating improvised nuclear weapons. The Frontier Justice, a cargo hauler carrying a crew of former soldiers, managed to position itself between the collective battleships before detonating its entire cargo hold 3,000 tons of mining explosives that had been meant for asteroid operations. But it was the last hope, a small courier ship with a crew of 3 that delivered the decisive blow. Captain Elena Vasquez had somehow managed to penetrate the collective formations core, where Admiral ZFY's flagship was coordinating the defense. For Earth came her final transmission. For all of us, the courier ship ran ZFY's flagship at maximum acceleration, its small fusion reactor overloading on impact. The explosion wasn't large by the standards of the battle, but it decapitated the collective command structure at the worst possible moment. Without their admiral's coordination, the collective formation began to fall apart. Ships that had been operating as a unified force suddenly found themselves fighting as individuals, their tactical advantages negated by the loss of their command hierarchy. The human fleet pressed their advantage, 800 ships converging on the scattered collective forces like a pack of wolves. What had been a battle became a rout, then a massacre, as the surviving collective vessels tried desperately to escape the system. When the tactical display finally cleared, less than 300 collective ships remained, and they were running for the hyperspace jump points as fast as their engines could carry them. The free human fleet had lost over 200 ships, but they had achieved something that no military analyst would have thought possible. They had broken the collective Navy in open battle. All ships, Admiral Voss broadcast, maintain pursuit. Don't let them regroup. But Ashworth was looking at something else on her display. Hyperspace signatures throughout collective space as human raider fleets, inspired by the free human fleet's example, began emerging from hiding. The scattered survivors of Earth's colonies were coming home, and they were bringing friends. The war was far from over, but for the first time since Earth's fall, humanity had hope. 6 months after the Battle of Zarian's Gate, the collective sued for peace. Captain Ashworth, now Admiral Ashworth, stood on the bridge of the New Earth, flagship of the reconstituted human defense fleet, watching as the formal surrender ceremony took place in the ruins of what had once been the galaxy's most powerful empire. The irony wasn't lost on her that they were meeting in the Sol system, orbiting the charred remains of humanity's homeworld. Transmission from the collective delegation. Communications Officer Valdane reported. Her voice was stronger now, her face no longer bearing the haunted look of those first desperate weeks after Earth's fall. On screen, the figure that appeared wasn't the crystalline form of a traditional collective leader, but something new, a hybrid consciousness that seemed to flicker between energy and matter, individual and collective thought. It called itself the Synthesis, and it spoke for what remained of the collective's governing body. Admiral Ashworth, it began, its harmonic voice carrying undertones of exhaustion and something that might have been respect. The Collective Council accepts the terms of the Terran Accords. We formally recognize humanity's sovereign right to exist and expand within the galaxy. Ashworth nodded, her expression carefully neutral. The Terran Accords were humanity's victory conditions, negotiated over 6 months of the most brutal asymmetric warfare the galaxy had ever witnessed. The terms were simple and absolute. Complete collective withdrawal from human space, reparations for Earth's destruction, and a formal guarantee that no species would ever again face systematic extermination. But the real victory wasn't written in the treaty documents. It was written in the fundamental change that had swept through the galaxy as hundreds of species watched humanity's impossible war and began to question the collective's assumptions about civilization and order. The reparations, the synthesis continued, will be transferred to the human colonies within the standard year. Raw materials, industrial equipment, and it paused, harmonics shifting with what might have been regret. Genetic samples from the Earth biosphere, preserved in our research facilities. The last part had been Ashworth's idea. If they couldn't have their homeworld back, they could at least recreate its life in the new worlds they would claim. Earth's forests and oceans, its animals and plants would bloom again under alien suns. The collective also agrees, the synthesis added, to the establishment of the Human Monitoring Council, with full authority to investigate any suspected violations of the Accords. Admiral Voss standing beside Ashworth, smiled grimly. The monitoring council was staffed entirely by humans, with access to collective space and the authority to deploy military force if necessary. It was humanity's insurance policy against future pacification campaigns. One final matter, Ashworth said, the status of the human survivors currently in collective custody. All human prisoners will be released immediately, the synthesis replied, including those taken during the initial conquest of Earth. That was the miracle none of them had dared hope for. That some of Earth's population had survived the bombardment, captured rather than killed during the collective systematic destruction of human civilization. The numbers were small, perhaps a few 100,000 out of 6 billion, but they were alive. The ceremony concluded with the formal transfer of the treaty documents, but Ashworth barely paid attention to the diplomatic protocols. Her mind was on the tactical display showing human fleets throughout the galaxy, no longer raiders and survivors, but the foundation of a new interstellar civilization. The Free Human Fleet had grown into the Free Human Navy, incorporating refugees and volunteers from dozens of species that had suffered under collective rule. The Belter Mining Consortium had evolved into a major industrial power, their asteroid cracking expertise now applied to shipbuilding and terraforming. Even the agricultural colonies had found their niche, developing new food sources for the hundreds of worlds where human influence was expanding. Admiral, Master Chief Thorne said quietly. Personal message from Captain Blackthorne. Ashworth frowned. Zoe Blackthorne was listed as killed in action at Velketh, her ship destroyed when she triggered the nova that announced humanity's return to galactic affairs. Impossible, she said. Blackthorne is dead. Man, Thorne continued, the message originated from the Kepler refuge. The timestamp shows it was sent yesterday. Ashworth stared at the tactical display, her mind racing. The Kepler refuge was the secret base where the original evacuation transports had established humanity's government in exile. If Blackthorne was alive, play it, she ordered. The holographic display shifted, showing a familiar figure in a makeshift uniform, standing in what looked like a hastily constructed command center. Captain Zoe Blackthorne looked exactly as Ashworth remembered her, scarred, determined, and absolutely uncompromising. Lyra, the recording began. If you're receiving this, it means we won. Good. I wasn't sure we would when I volunteered for the deep mission. Deep mission? Ashworth had never heard the term before. The nova at Velketh was a fake. Blackthorne continued, her image flickering slightly. We used a captured collective ship to broadcast the explosion signature while the real blood of martyrs jumped to hyperspace. The collective never knew we survived. The recording paused as Blackthorne looked at something off-screen. For the past 6 months, we've been conducting deep reconnaissance in collective space, mapping their infrastructure, identifying their weaknesses. What we found, she shook her head. They're more vulnerable than we thought. Their entire civilization is built on the assumption that conquered species stay conquered. Ashworth felt a chill as she realized what Blackthorne was suggesting. 17 species have contacted us, the recording continued. Former collective subjects who want to know how we did it. How we made the galaxy's most powerful empire afraid of a few hundred ships full of angry humans. Blackthorne smiled, and it was the same predatory expression Ashworth remembered from the bridge of the indomitable will. The collective thinks this war is over, Blackthorne said. They're wrong. This was just the opening move. Humanity's real war, the one where we remake the galaxy in our image, that starts now. The recording ended, leaving Ashworth staring at empty space while her mind processed the implications. The Terran Accords weren't the end of the conflict, they were humanity's opportunity to transform from raiders and survivors into something far more dangerous. Galactic liberators. Ma'am, Knox said quietly. Orders. Ashworth looked out at the charred remains of Earth, then at the tactical display showing human fleets scattered across the galaxy like seeds, planted in fertile ground. The collective had called humanity a wound in the galactic order, something to be cauterized and forgotten. They had been right about one thing: humanity was a wound. But wounds didn't just scar, they taught the body to recognize threats, to develop defenses, to become stronger. And now the galaxy was about to learn what humanity looked like when it was no longer fighting for survival, but for something far more ambitious, the right to determine its own destiny among the stars. Signal the fleet, she ordered. All ships, prepare for the next phase of operations. It's time to show the galaxy what humans do when someone tries to end our story. Outside the viewport, the stars waited millions of worlds, thousands of species, all of them about to discover what it meant when humanity decided to write a new chapter in galactic history, one where the wow became the cure.